Everyone knows the Titanic hit an iceberg. That's the story. That's always been the story. But here's what they don't tell you. Dozens of ships hit icebergs and didn't sink. The iceberg didn't doom the Titanic alone. A catastrophic chain of human decisions, corporate pressure, fatal design flaws, and a series of warnings that were read, acknowledged, and completely ignored. That's what sent 1,500 people to the bottom of the North Atlantic. The iceberg was just the last mistake in a very long line of them. And the real story is far more chilling than any Hollywood version you've ever seen. To understand why the Titanic really sank, you have to start before it ever left the dock. Because the disaster wasn't born in the North Atlantic on the night of April 14, 1912. It was built into the ship, the schedule, and the culture surrounding it long before a single passenger stepped on board. The Titanic was the product of an arms race. White Star Line, the British shipping company that built her, was locked in fierce competition with its rival Cunard, which had recently launched the Mauretania and Lusitania, the fastest ocean liners in the world. White Star couldn't beat Cunard on speed, so they changed the game entirely. Their answer was size and luxury. The Titanic and her sister ships, the Olympic and Britannic, would be the largest moving objects ever built by human hands. They would be floating palaces, and that reputation needed to be established immediately, dramatically, and on schedule. Schedule mattered enormously. The pressure to complete the maiden voyage on time and in spectacle was immense. J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of White Star Line, was on board the Titanic himself, a fact that would later fuel accusations that he pushed Captain Edward Smith to maintain speed despite iceberg warnings. Whether Ismay directly ordered Smith to keep pace is debated by historians. What is not debated is that the ship was traveling at 22 knots, nearly full speed, through waters that had been repeatedly flagged as dangerous with ice. And those warnings were not subtle. On April 14th alone, the Titanic received at least 6 separate iceberg warnings from other ships in the area. 6. The Californian, the Baltic, the Mesaba, the America. Ship after ship transmitted coordinates of ice fields sitting directly in the Titanic's path. Some warnings reached the bridge. Others were handled by the radio operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, who were overwhelmed processing a backlog of passenger telegrams, personal messages from wealthy travelers that, by the commercial priorities of the era, took precedence over navigational safety communications. One warning from the Mesaba, historians believe, never made it to the bridge at all. Captain Smith, an experienced and widely respected mariner making his final voyage before retirement, maintained speed. This was not unusual by the standards of the day. It was common practice in 1912 to proceed at pace through ice fields, trusting in lookouts to spot danger in time to steer clear. What the Titanic lacked, fatally, was a pair of binoculars for those lookouts. The binoculars that should have been in the crow's nest were locked in a cabinet, and the officer who had the key had been reassigned before departure and taken it with him. Frederick Fleet, the lookout who first spotted the iceberg, later testified that with binoculars he would have seen it far sooner, far enough to avoid it entirely.
Then there was the iceberg itself, and this is where the physics become brutal. When Fleet spotted it and rang the warning bell, First Officer William Murdoch ordered the engines reversed and the wheel turned hard. That decision, debated ever since, may have actually worsened the outcome. Maritime engineers have argued that if Murdoch had steered directly into the iceberg at full speed, the collision would have been frontal, damaging the bow, flooding perhaps 2 compartments, but leaving the ship afloat. By turning, the Titanic scraped along the iceberg's underwater shelf, buckling and separating hull plates across 5 compartments in a long, thin gash running nearly the entire length of the ship. That was one compartment too many. Here is where the design flaw becomes lethal. The Titanic's watertight compartments, her celebrated safety feature, had one critical weakness. Their walls didn't reach the ceiling. They extended only to a certain height above the waterline. As the bow flooded and tilted forward, water reached the top of the first compartment's wall and cascaded into the next, then the next, then the next, like water filling an ice cube tray. The compartments that were supposed to save the ship became the mechanism of its destruction. The lifeboats then delivered the final unconscionable failure. The Titanic carried 20 lifeboats, enough for roughly 1,178 people. The ship was carrying 2,224. That means that even if every lifeboat had been perfectly filled, more than 1,000 people were always going to die. But the boats weren't filled properly. In the chaos and disbelief of those first hours, many passengers refused to believe the ship was actually sinking. Lifeboats launched embarrassingly underfilled. Lifeboat number 1 left with just 12 people aboard. It had capacity for 40. Across the fleet of boats, an estimated 400 additional spaces went to sea empty, while people stood on the deck above and drowned. Why were there only 20 lifeboats? Because British Board of Trade regulations hadn't been updated since 1894, when ships were far smaller. The Titanic actually exceeded the legal requirement for its registered tonnage. It was following the rules. The rules were simply catastrophically outdated, and nobody had pushed to change them because the ocean liner industry had successfully lobbied the idea that modern ships were effectively unsinkable. That word, unsinkable, is perhaps the most dangerous word in this entire story. It wasn't just marketing, it was a belief that had permeated the culture surrounding these ships so completely that it affected every decision made that night. Why slow down for ice warnings if the ship can't sink? Why fill lifeboats if the ship can't sink? Why update regulations for ships that can't sink? When the Titanic disappeared beneath the surface at 2:20 in the morning on April 15, 1912, she took 1,517 people with her. And in the inquiry that followed on both sides of the Atlantic, the uncomfortable truth slowly surfaced alongside the wreckage. The iceberg was just the trigger. Speed, arrogance, regulatory failure, corporate pressure, missing binoculars, a locked cabinet, a misrouted warning, and a civilization that had confused technological ambition with invincibility. That's what really sank the Titanic. The ocean didn't defeat that ship. Hubris did.